Are you ready? Yes. Oh, Mr. Estrada is ready. Come on, come on. My outline? And
This side.
why don't you take a chair and sit down, but I move forward because then I can't hear you.
Can I be heard back there? Can you hear me in the back?
42.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name is Rudolph Estrada, and I took great interest in reading The Next Society, not because it was an assignment, because it so accurately reflected what has happened in my life. I'm one of the people that the article talks about, somebody over 50 years old. Didn't think I'd ever be there. I thought you were supposed to get to 25, excuse me, and just kind of hover on that age for a long period of time. In my early years, I like to kind of set this up. I was drafted out of UCLA back in 1969, served in the military, and when I came out, completed my undergraduate degree, and then went on to get a graduate degree. I was picked up back in Washington, D.C. With the U.S. Department of Commerce, and I had an assignment of analyzing the migration and development of franchising industry. And it seemed to spark my interest. That is the entrepreneurial spirit of it. And I did that for several years, traveled around the country, analyzing various population growths and where industry was going. And through many opportunities I had, I later accepted a position here in California as the director of the U.S. Small Business Administration. For those of you who are not familiar with the SBA, it's the kind of the federal bank that lends to businesses. And I thought, what a great opportunity to work with a number of people, very substantial budget, a whole lot of people. And this is at a fairly young age. I was still in my late 20s. And the reason I took it was more of a selfish reason than a career position. I wanted to be able to look at the best businesses that came through that agency and see if I couldn't replicate it or duplicate it when I knew I was going to leave the agency. Didn't share that with people that I worked with because as a career person, you want to give the impression that you're going to be there for the 50 years that you normally put in the government position and then leave. And I recognized very quickly that the people that I worked with were not as inclined to be entrepreneurial as maybe I was. And as a result, I also saw that I could never, ever begin to replicate or duplicate the experiences that many people had already put into these businesses, so I felt it was going to be a waste. I quickly started to look at making some very quick decisions as it relates to plotting my career. And in that period of time that I was there, I was approached by a Japanese bank. Actually, I was approached by an executive search firm. I went to work for a very large Japanese bank back in Nagoya, Japan. And it was a very interesting 8 to 10 years. I worked between Nagoya, Japan, and Seoul, Korea.
You speak Japanese?
Skoshi.
What?
A little bit. No.
Skoshi.
Enough to get in trouble. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Enough to get in trouble.
Have they get started to laugh when you try it?
Yeah.
Speak Japanese.
But I can speak Spanish. That didn't do me any good there, though. After spending a number of years with them, I actually came back to the States. I was working here in California, actually in this region, and I commissioned a study out of our budget to look at where banking was going. And again, this was kind of a self-serving analysis that we did. And the study came back and reflected very quickly that banking was going to be going through some major changes. We were immensely profitable because we were in the securities industry. And a quick assignment change for me when I came back to California was to be in charge of the SBA lending for these banks, for Tokai Bank, of which I thought I had mastered because I was director of the SBA. And I could see how profitable it was. Part of the study that came back indicated that there was going to be a proliferation of independent banks. And I could see how profitable our department was, our division for the bank. So I started to put together this kind of an exit strategy that I would leave and start up my own company. Outsourcing or having independent banks outsource their SBA lending departments to us. I made that particular decision and decided to leave a very handsome salary and a lot of benefits, and as you well know, working for the Japanese at that time, very paternalistic. You could work there forever and expect to have a job. Made the departure, left, made the decision to leave, and I remember my boss came to me and said, if you leave the bank, you can never come back. You're going to be kind of persona non grata. So I asked myself the question, I really want to leave? And I said, yes, I want to. I went off and I started a company back about 16 years ago called Summit Group. In fact, there's a couple of people in this class that were indirectly clients of ours. And we started up the company with the intent of being the best providing the best service possible in terms of outsourcing SBA departments. Many banks, with the growth of business, wanted to engage in SBA lending but couldn't afford to retain the executives to manage departments, so they found it very easy to outsource their entire department to our company. It became just incredibly successful, both from the standpoint of professional realization, monetary reward, and I just felt tremendously good about myself. I don't know whether I was ever totally satisfied, but I felt totally content where I was at that time of my life. We looked at the industry in total, and we could see that the banking industry was growing very quickly, and there also was some interesting developments. Banks were being acquired, merging, and we started to see, we went from 1 bank to 5 banks to 10 banks to 15 banks to 25 banks. We had about...
What did you outsource?
They outsourced their small business lending departments to us. So if you walked into Home Savings of America, you were actually talking to our company. If you walked into Trans World Bank, you were actually talking to our company. And before long, we started to see that banks started to contract, the acquisitions. I didn't want to believe that, to be honest with you. I really thought it was just an aberration in the marketplace because we were doing so wildly successful. And what I failed to realize was that things changed very rapidly. And as the article that Dr. Drucker points out, you need to maintain knowledge. You need to be changing all the time and keeping up with the industry. I didn't do that because I thought it was going to be around forever, just like I thought I was going to be 25 years forever. And here I find myself at 52 and going from 37 clients and about $70 billion under management, we're dropping down to about 4 or 5 banks. And now I made the decision to change our venue and go into something else. And it's very, very difficult when you've basically captured a market segment that you've been very successful in to make those turns. And it's very difficult when you have children that have graduated from college and they start asking you, well, why are you making this change? This is because you need to know that things are very dynamic. Nothing is guaranteed. And I'm finding it interesting as well as difficult to let go, to acquiesce some of those particular management styles that I had. But the more that I let go, the easier it's becoming, and I'm finding that keeping up as a knowledge worker is absolutely imperative for success. And I went through and I kind of chronologically explained a couple of careers to you. And I'm going to be starting my third career, because on top of what I've done before, I've always kind of taught, I've taught at the California State University for the last 22 years. And I'm going to be completing my doctorates and eventually divorce myself from what I'm doing now and go to teach full time. So I found your article extremely prophetic and fit just like a shoe.
You are teaching full time now?
Yes.
Where?
Cal State, LA. I teach at the Cal State system.
Where in Cal State?
California State University, Los Angeles.
Oh, and what are you teaching?
Small business management.
Oh.
So it's kind of it's been a parachute for me. I've kind of realized that I needed to make some changes.
And where's Cal State Los Angeles going to be in 10 years?
Well, where is it going to be in 10 years?
Where's it going to be in 10 years? You tell us.
I figure at that time somebody would be taking care of me.
Now, wait a minute. In 10 years, man, you'll be president of Cal State Los Angeles, as you undoubtedly plan to be. What are you going to do?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the best things I've found,
Huh?
one of the best things I have found is, and I would insist this of any faculty, if I were the president of that university and I'd made my feelings known to the dean, I would insist that before any faculty sit in front of students, especially in the field of business, that they had served some time in business. Either met a payroll, hire or fire somebody, put together a business plan, feel the feeling of failure, feel the joy of success. But I think that they should experience that before they get in front of students like ourselves. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, except you'll be very frustrated.
Okay. I can't disagree with you, but that wouldn't be the first time I'd been frustrated. I don't want to overstay my
No,
welcome
you
here.
haven't. So far, you have still got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think I would just be adding information that would be somewhat superfluous. But if I had to go back, and I'm not saying that because this gentleman here is to my left. I'm saying this because I've not read an article like this, Next Society, that has had the impact that that's had on me, because it seems like somebody wrote it for me. And I'm sure there are people that are sitting in this classroom that maybe feel the same way. We're kind of creatures of habit, as I like to say. If you don't believe me, look where you're sitting. Most of the time we kind of gravitate towards a kind of a comfortable position and like to mark our spot. And I think that we have to grow beyond that and look at a changing environment, dynamics of what the future holds. And I think we need to keep learning, as the article so eloquently states. It's a continuous, it's just like eating and breathing. We must continue to gain this knowledge, because it is so fluid. It takes us wherever we want to go. So with that, I don't know what they did last time. Did they take questions or pelted with fruit or something? Or, I don't know what.
Hold it a second.
I shall.
Let's be a little systematic, because we want to learn. First, I hope you have all realized that Rudy has been in the military and in the government, which means he has learned how to make presentations, right?
I hope so.
What?
I would hope so.
But the military began to teach you.
Yes.
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 This was, he knew what to, wanted to say, and he said it was structured. So, but it was 5 seconds after he had begun, it was clear to me at least, that he had been, and then I looked at his bio and saw why, that he had obviously a lot of experience with presentations, unlike the rest of you. And that is how many years in the military?
Well, I was only drafted for a couple of years.
Yeah, oh, but then government forever.
Well, I was on the President's Commission on the, I was a small business commissioner,
Yeah.
and I had to make presentations there.
Obviously experienced in making presentations, but have you got any comment on the presentation and on the delivery? Any comment? Anything you would? Yes.
You weren't here at the last Friday when we had an opportunity to listen to the audience. But I kind of got lost in the beginning in terms of the whole purpose of your presentation. What I picked up on, for the first 6 or 7 minutes was really background information, historical information on how you started, where you are today. But I really didn't get a sense of what you felt the challenges were given your current position, 5, 10 years out, and what are the implications for you today as a knowledge worker in terms of my towards the future.
Can you repeat for me the gist of what you answered? You heard it. Your hearing is good, mine isn't.
He basically, I think, suggested that he was not able to understand my presentation for the first 6 or 7 minutes, figuring I wasn't making I guess, an appropriate delivery of what the dilemma was that I was facing. I attempted to set it up so that I was able to share with you some of the experiential arrangements that I've had in my life, not necessarily all successful by other standards. By many, they would say it was very successful, but the dilemma for me is every time I achieve something, I raise the bar higher. And ultimately, when you get to the end of a career, you think that you'd like to say, I put a cap on that and feel real good about it. I've never felt that way, unfortunately, and that's been my dilemma.
Yeah, and my whole point is going back to the systematic approach that we were talking about earlier. You start with a destination, and you kind of started history.
Right. That's why he is.
Basically, the banking industry has been shrinking over the next 10, 15 years. There was a glut of financial institutions. We had about 12,000 banks, 30,000 credit unions. In there being 12 or 2 years, it was shrink down to about 6,000 banks, 5,000 credit unions. We're looking at about 4 mega banks and
Any-
super regional banks. So basically, we were told back in the early 90s that there was going to be significant change going on, that the community banks were basically
Yes. I think Mr. Ayala is echoing the comment that I made that he's been banking for many years, and the Federal Reserve had informed him that there was going to be a contraction in the independent banking community, and he was taking a position kind of contrary to this other gentleman, understanding my points the first 5 or 6 minutes.
Any other? Christine Day.
Hi, Christine.
First of all, I want to say, I think one of your real strengths in presenting is your very calm nature. It's very obvious that you're comfortable in talking about a subject
Thank you.
So that was really great.
Thank you. But she was being complimentary on my, I guess, my presentation, but I kind of felt the zinger coming. I may be wrong.
It's important to always see both sides.
Yes, yes.
I guess I was struck with the same, Ben, okay. A comment regarding purpose, because I wasn't clear if you were talking about the breakup of the banking industry and the overall impact that that could have in society and then personally to a small business owner, or secondly, if you were talking about your own personal contemplation over a failure. And you were struck by the failure. I think you wanted to tell a more personal story. I think if you were going that route, it would be nice to hear, okay, I would like to hear it up front, and then here's my history, here's all my successes. I had a failure, what am I learning from it, and how am I going to apply it? So it would have had some more structure to it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
As a business owner, I can only imagine that the decision to leave Summit Group behind wasn't made in an hour. And what I didn't hear you talk about was, did you examine other alternatives?
Actually,
Why did you
yes.
decide to leave it rather than try to take it in a different direction?
Actually, I haven't left it. We're kind of reinventing ourselves. We found a niche in corporate governance, and I went from 50 employees down to about 5 employees now, and I believe that we found a rather virgin territory to pursue, and that's in corporate governance in companies pre-IPO. So I never left it. I just kind of reconstituted ourselves.
I hope you listened to this. That was very important.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Very important, that impression. The lady there, Jane.
You quite candidly stated that many of the decisions or positions that you accepted were self-serving. And at the end of your presentation, you mentioned that you've been teaching for over 20 years.
Yes.
Is there a self-serving aspect of that?
Nothing gives me greater gratification than to share with young minds my experiences and as they relate to business as well. And in the field that I've been teaching, the empirical knowledge that I'm able to share with them, I think is very rewarding for them as well.
And as a follow-up, did you find that teaching experience helpful in making the difficult transitions that you've had to in the last few years?
Repeat the question.
The question was, have I found teaching to be a challenge in let's see, forcing me to keep up with current events, so to speak? Is that?
Well, you spoke about the businesses
Yes.
and each element kind of self-serving, and you recognize
Right.
the self-serving element in it. But the teaching, I don't hear any self-serving. You are,
I enjoy that.
and I wondered if that
Sure.
experience assisted you in making the difficult transitions personally that you talked about.
Actually, it's allowed me to have a softer landing if I decide to go that avenue. But what I wanted to say is that what I get out of teaching, and I think we all pursue professional or personal goals for some self-serving interests. Mine was I'm a capitalist. I very much enjoyed wealth, maintaining wealth and acquiring wealth. You don't get that out of teaching. And what I really appreciate about that is it keeps you on your toes. You'd be surprised how bright the new generation of people come on. They don't have a whole lot of patience. They want it right away.
The judge, no, the judge. Didn't you want to come in, Judge? No? Did you want to come in?
Do I want to comment?
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
On your company with the Summit Group.
Yes.
And the fact that you're working from the banking side for small businesses, I work for a company, we have approximately 13 or 1,400 franchises.
Yes.
And one of the issues we have is that we don't have a lot of banks that want to lend to them, so we ended up lending ourselves. And we looked at large corporations who use franchises and work with those people to finance their businesses. Banks are always willing to lend money if you could set up a proper model of who would be a successful business within that environment. And with big companies coming out like Walmart driving the mom and pop type of operations out, what about the franchises and expanding into that kind of business?
That's a very good point. We represented about 5 of the major.
How many?
Oh, I'm sorry. Gentleman is commenting whether we had explored looking at the franchises to represent franchises in their lending, and said that banks are always willing to make loans. What I would be willing to, what I'd want to say is, my colleague up here in banking, banks primarily now are willing to make loans as long as you don't need the money. What we found is that with the shrinkage of independent banking, that willingness and aggressiveness in lending has also dissipated. But we used to represent about 5 or 6 of the major national franchise operations throughout the country with the bank. So we explored that probably 10 years ago.
And we work with a lot of foreigners who don't have a lot of capital but have the will to work and the people to work. They want between $300,000 and $2 million typically for a business, and banks really don't want to work with them.
I would concur. Yeah, that's kind of a market that is it goes very unaddressed.
Anybody else? Let me say I'm surprised no one asked the question that would perhaps have some importance to you. Look, here's Mr. Estrada, who is in his 3rd successful career, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He changed roughly every 12 and a half to 15 years, didn't you?
12 years maybe?
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's one type, because he has not changed his field. He started out, after he came out of the military, probably by sheer accident in the Small Business Administration, because they had a job. You had never heard of them before, probably.
Actually, when I came out of the military, I applied for a loan with the Small Business Administration. I was declined.
Okay. And he has been staying in that field of financing small business ever since. First in the Small Business Administration, then in the outsourcing of the small business loans of the bank, and now is teaching. He has explored his expertise and his interest in a number of directions. And let me say, the state of California has retirement ages at age 65, isn't it, or 70 is the latest, and then he'll probably find himself another way. But it is almost predictable, because once you have established a pattern, you stay with it, that Mr. Estrada will find a way to explore and put to use his extensive and unique expertise. Anybody here who knows anything about financing small business? He's the only one, I would say. He has found a way to exploit it in this direction and in that direction, and build 3, and I have a suspicion yet the 4th one to come, career on a unique, or unique is too big a word, on a personal expertise and interest. That is one type. But it's not the only type. And especially if you live, your working life is as long as ours is now these days. It's a good idea to know what kind of pattern fits you. There are some in this room who will stay and want to stay in that one area and not change at all. I read, if you read the biographies of the Nobel Prize winners, they typically start with their PhD thesis when they are 27-year-old physicists and stay in that area. And in today's paper, there's a biography of a distinguished scientist who died, and it said he didn't get the PhD Nobel Prize because he had too many interests. In each of them he contributed a major achievement. But that frightens the typical academic scientist. Maybe the greatest mathematician of the first half of the century was John von Neumann. Ever heard of him? Neumann architecture, of which all computers are being based. Well, I just read a biography of his written by an Englishman, and he commented that this, even though Neumann, thank you very much, even though Neumann wasn't recognized as the premier mathematician of this century, he was never really accepted by the mathematicians because he worked in too many areas. That is not respectable. There are, and that was particularly prominent, but let me say, that is also true when you look at the outstanding achievers in the field. They are rarely multidimensional. If you say who is the greatest of all, the greatest musicians, well, there's one, Schoenberg, who in his youth also wrote some very exotic novels, not very good ones. But otherwise he was a musician. And there is no record of either Bach or Mozart or Beethoven or Haydn or any of them having ever done anything but music. There's Leonardo da Vinci, yes, but that maybe explains why so few of his works survived, because he never learned the craft. He did too many things. You know, to learn the craft takes 10 years, or what have you. Other than that, if you look at the great painters, there's no record of Rembrandt ever having done anything but painting. Yeah, wenching. Rembrandt was a rather notorious womanizer. But that doesn't take that much time. Otherwise, he just painted. And the very great achievers are single-minded. But not only the very great achievers. In this room, we have people who will stay in that one job, that one career, all their lives, and do the same thing and love it. And then you have the people like Rudy, who, yes, if you look at Rudy, he's so far, he has been doing what he knows and loves, which is small business finance and small business management. But he has explored it in a number of directions, and I think one can predict pattern by the time of he's 52, aren't you?
No, I'm
What?
older than 50, so 53.
53, okay. By that time, you know, we are pretty much set in our ways. It is reasonably predictable that Rudy's next career, and he has a very good chance of having a next career with life expectancies what they are and retirement ages what they are. His next career will be applying the same knowledge in yet another direction. That is a pattern, and it fits him. And he's been very successful with it, and it satisfies him. And then there are people in this room who change. Now, 15 years is a long time, you know. And maybe when you're 30, you don't know your pattern. Not only maybe, you probably, unless you're one of those monomaniacs. And accept the fact that the only people who really have the great results are monomaniacs. Most of them have no results. Most of them just keep on banging their head against the wall. But the ones who have results have the great results. If you look at the great achievers, there's no record that Napoleon ever tried to compose music, or tried to paint, or tried to write a novel. On the other hand, there is no record of any of the great novelists ever having done anything else. The great achievers are monomaniacs. And most of the people who spend their lives writing novels are justly forgotten. They haven't achieved anything. But the few novelists whom we still remember, they're not very many. They never did anything else. And the same is true of the few painters or the few great scientists. Yes, Albert Einstein loved to play the fiddle. He had, and he is reported to have said that he would have given everything, Nobel Prize and so on, if he could ever learn to play the fiddle. He had one fatal shortcoming. In order to play a string instrument, you have to have coordination between your string arm and your bow arm and your string arm, and he didn't have it. And if you don't have it, you can't learn it. And so he always came in at the wrong pitch. But he loved to play the fiddle. He knew he wasn't any good at it. But it relaxed him. And he did not become a violinist. There's only one in the whole history of music, one great musician who was the first great virtuoso on two instruments. That's Mozart. Mozart was as good on the violin as he was on the piano. And then he decided not to play the violin because he said that in order to be good, you have to practice 3 hours a day, and you can only do that on one instrument. And so he decided for the piano. And he's the only exception. Nobody else played more than one instrument. So the great achievers are monomaniacs, and they risk getting nowhere, but if they get somewhere, it matters. And then you have this personality. These are personality patterns. You're probably born with them. I'm reasonably sure, temperaments. Like Rudy here, who acquires that in his 20s, an expertise and an interest, and now has learned, and is perhaps not systematically, but let me say you don't have to be systematic, because you know the opportunities when they come to you. You know, this is my opportunity. And he's almost said that. Yes.
Dr. Drucker, how would you characterize your own career?
What?
How would you characterize your own career?
Well, I said I'm a third type. No, there are 2 more types. I'm the third type in that I do several things in parallel, different things. I teach and I write and I consult, and I have done that. Well, I think I knew when I was 30 where I belonged. Till then I had no idea, kind of drifted. And I fell into it. And then I knew this is right for me. But that's a very, I wouldn't say common, yes, it's a very common. People who basically stay for a long time, if not forever, doing the same things, but doing several things that may overlap or feed into each other, but are quite different. And then there's a 4th type, by no means uncommon, we have it in this room. People who every 15 years change fundamentally. I got a paper from one of you, don't ask me which one, I think it's a man, yes, who changed, I would say, a little younger than Rudy, I would say in his 40s. So he's on his 3rd change, and it's totally different. He's starting from scratch. These people, let me say, have to start at the top. They don't know enough to start at the bottom. At the top, it's much easier to fake, much easier. They are bright, they are quick learners. But they start, they get, I wouldn't say they get bored, it's the wrong word. They get the feeling this man is one of you. Wrote, I changed because I reached the point where I didn't learn anything anymore. The day had no surprises anymore. I knew exactly what to expect. And they didn't say it bored me, but when something else came in over the transom, totally different. It's got to fit your temperament. Let me see, certain things you can't change. How many of you are comfortable working with people? I doubt it. This is a personality trait most of us overrate. I'm not saying that you are a loner. I happen to be a loner. I'm not comfortable working with people. As a consultant, yes, but then I don't see these people again for a long time. But in a group, in a team, but comfortable working with people, I would say about half of the ones who raised their hands. The other ones can tolerate them. How many of you thrive in insecurity, in uncertainty? How many of you? How many do not? How many of you like to be a big fish in a small pond? And how many of you, the opposite, enjoy the big organization? I know one here who does, it's Marie Deutsch. She made it very clear that she loves the big organization, don't you? What? No? Yeah. I'm not sure about Rudy, even though he was in a very big one in small business administration. But I think what he did after that would indicate that he much prefers a small one. I don't know. I didn't make it clear. Let me see. How many of you get your psychic rewards from being a member of a well-known organization? Anybody? How many of you start out by saying, I work for General Electric? Anybody? Nobody? Some of you do, believe me. And, what? Yeah, yeah. It's one of the difficulties young Japanese have, because in Japan you are expected, when you're a young person, to get your psychic reward from belonging to Mitsubishi. And if you are not that kind of a person, you know what I'm saying. If you didn't enjoy, those are things one should know about oneself. But above all, know what kind of career is the wrong word. If you learn one thing from what Rudy told us, and it was very important, is to take responsibility for yourself, which doesn't mean that you plan where you should be the next time, but you know what is opportunity when it knocks. We see opportunity, as an old saying is, knocks once. And when the door is not opened, it goes to the next door. It doesn't knock twice. And one has to know one's temperament, one's personality, one's pattern, to know what is opportunity. If you're one of those people who don't belong in a big organization, then the most attractive offer from General Electric is not for me, no matter what they offer. And on the other hand, if I need that structure and prestige of a big organization, then being on my own is not for me either. So this is one of the important things I hope you heard, because Rudy made it very not clear by implication. He has acquired that unique expertise. It's not world-shaking, but it's important. And it's not isn't the only one, there are enough others, but not too many. Because it's, as he implied, the ordinary commercial bank does not have it, right? They don't understand that the small business is not, as you implied, a financial loan, but an entrepreneurial loan. You almost said that in those words, didn't you? Yes. That's well, I don't quite know what that means, since I have never been in that business, but he sees a clear difference, and the commercial banks are not good at it, which, by the way, is not a new discovery. One of the most interesting biographies of business is a biography of the John Deere Company, the farm implement people, written about 20 years ago, which consists mostly of Mr. Deere's letters, mostly. And Mr. Deere again and again and again points out he had a small and growing business, that the commercial banks of his days, this is 1860, local banks simply did not understand his business and didn't understand. And so he tried to finance himself outside of the banking system, which was not here. So it's nothing new. And so our friend here, Rudolph Estrada, has that knowledge and the temperament, and he has exploited it in this direction, and then exploited it in being the outsourcer for the banks, and now is exploiting it and teaching it, and I have a suspicion very soon he'll be in the administration. He is not the kind of a person who's going to stay in the faculty. He's going to be the dean in no time. Do you agree? Yeah. Yes.
My undergraduate is from Calcio Los Angeles, and what attracted you to teach there? I mean, I'm sure you had various options, but what was it that you decided?
Actually, I taught at about 6 campuses of the Cal State system, as well as UCLA. And I like that because I also got my undergraduate there as well. And there's a lot of, I want to say, disenfranchised potential entrepreneurs there. A lot of minority community attend that campus, and I'm finding now that many of the minority participants are also very entrepreneurial. I think they have the best opportunity to gain information. So that's why I gravitated to that school.
Do you mind if I give you one advice?
Sure.
Before you start the next career, get the PhD, because you'll need it. You'll need the trade union certificate. So get the PhD fast. Yeah, and don't delay too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.